Another requested filmmaking tip was for how to block scenes with actors and how do you come up with that as a director. And so I wanted to take this in a couple of stages. So we've talked about storyboarding in the past, and my directing students are currently storyboarding their projects, and I told them that I often storyboard before I even have locations because I want to think about the imagery, the kind of what are the most important images from the scene, from my imagination or how I'm imagining it, and really think about, again, what is that resonant imagery or thematic imagery, or what are some of the visual themes and storytelling that I'm going for in terms of not just shot size but other aspects, focus, lens choices, aspect ratios, color choices, saturation, all of those things. And create a shot list, which is based on how that storyboard is turned into camera setups, most often using an overhead to kind of plot those out. And a lot of that is where you start thinking about what is the blocking. I mean, I think about it during storyboard too, but once you have an actual location and you see where things are going to be arranged, and especially how the camera might capture the movement, that is where blocking really becomes important. And blocking rehearsals, either before production or certainly on the day of set, are critical to making sure that you are capturing the footage that you want. So blocking is essentially figuring out how the actors are moving through the scene as they are saying the dialogue that needs to be said from the script and doing whatever the other action is in the script for that scene. So there are two kind of big action buckets here. One is the dramatic action beat of the scene, and there are usually several, and those help build the narrative momentum and the intensity build of the kind of narrative arc of the scene, where the character is pursuing whatever goal that they have, and they are encountering some kind of obstacle. And then in that obstacle and that conflict and challenge, they are then reacting and doing something because of that and kind of trying to pivot around it. So that's kind of the dramatic action, or the various action beats of the scene that you need to plot out in your director's script, which we've talked about before. And that action beat could be in the form of dialogue, or it could be in the form of an actual action, A punch can be a verbal punch. It can also be a physical punch. So you just have to figure out which one's which or what you need in the scene. And obviously the script should tell you what the writer intended. And then as a director, you have the choice to add to that. So that's kind of the obvious action bucket. The non-obvious action bucket is what I've heard referred to, or what I call the business of the scene, which is, what is this character doing kind of in reality, So no human being stands and speaks and has a conversation with somebody. Nobody creates an action by standing perfectly still. That doesn't happen. And in our normal conversations, I mean, I'm talking with my hands. People move, they stutter, they fidget, they stand up. They do different things. And there's a business aspect to the scene, which is critical to the blocking nature. And that is what kind of sets them or roots them into the reality of the setting that they're in. Are they at home in the kitchen? What are you doing when you're at home in the kitchen? Is it dinner time? Is it breakfast time? Is it, late night snack time? Like, that can give you some focus for like what the character is actively doing, and that these kind of dramatic action beats can then be threaded through or kind of intensified in that. So nobody's in the kitchen for no reason. You don't just kind of, oops, I found myself in the kitchen. I mean, I do sometimes, but usually that's because I'm like on my way to something and I'm kind of on autopilot. And that in and of itself is a kind of business or action. When somebody's at the dentist, you're thumbing through a magazine, you're checking your phone, you're watching whatever reality or daytime show is on the TV in the lobby. That is the business of the scene. That's kind of the physical action that you're doing, or that your character is doing, in the midst of whatever the dramatic beat is happening. So you have to think about those two things. Again, obviously a dramatic action beat might be in the form of something physical, but you also want to think about, what is this person doing in this space, and how would they realistically, or how would this character deal with this space in this moment, in this time, wherever they are on their kind of narrative journey or character journey. And that is what helps start figuring out the blocking moves throughout that space. So nobody stands up for no reason. Nobody crosses the room for no reason. So going back to another previous video, why? Why is this character doing this? Why are they doing anything? You always have to ask why. And that why should reveal the psychology or the makeup of this person, the personality behind it. So behavior is psychology. That is kind of what we're showcasing as directors when we're putting this on a stage or on the screen. As directors for film, we can't show sadness, like that's a feeling, but we can show the behavior that communicates that this character is sad. So maybe they're in the dentist's office and they're very nervous or anxious or stressed out because they don't want to be at the dentist. And so then they're trying to distract themselves by watching the daytime show or thumbing through a magazine. And then how they're doing that can also help convey that feeling. Are they just kind of nervously ripping through pages? Are they opening it and just kind of staring at it blankly? These are actions, little actions that convey the dramatic action, the big dramatic beats that are telling the story. So even in a conversation piece, when somebody takes a sip of coffee or breaks eye contact or lets out a huge sigh, these are all, don't forget the human mechanisms that our bodies are constantly doing. We're breathing, we're, something catches our eye, we're looking at food. You don't want food to go cold. You want to eat your food. The business stuff can really help root what's going on in the scene and create that reality that will help sell this moment. But it's so important to tie it to whatever the dramatic action beats are, because if I'm angry, how am I eating my food? If I'm sad, how am I eating my food? And so you need to understand the how and the why and what's going on with the characters to really bring this to life. The only time I had issues was when a particular camera angle that I wanted to shoot a scene through a doorway, and the lens that I wanted to use and the blocking that we had just wasn't working, because with the arrangement that I wanted with that blocking, basically one character was blocking the other character. There just wasn't a way to get both. There were actually 3 characters in the scene in that frame, and so we had to change lenses, and we had to kind of change angles and figure out for the shot what was most important, because I wanted that framing of the doorway. And so trying to figure out how to make that work, or whether that was something I had to give up in favor of something else from a blocking, performance, framing standpoint. So that's the only time that I've ever really had issues with blocking, and it wasn't the blocking itself, it was how then our camera angle was working with the blocking, which obviously is a critical issue, because you need to tell your story. So that is a little bit about how to think about taking your story from script format and putting it into an actual location and physical action